Elite theory is an important concept in philosophy, political science, and sociology that attempts to dissect power dynamics in modern society. According to this theory, a small but wealthy and heavily networked faction holds the majority of the power, and they wield it separate from the influence of democratic elections. These members of the elite use positions in corporations, think tanks, and policy discussion groups to exert control over corporate and governmental decisions. Understanding the core characteristics of this theory involves recognizing that power is heavily concentrated. The elites are unified in their interests due to their similar backgrounds and positions, while the non-elites are diverse and powerless. The defining feature of power in this context is institutional position. Contrary to the notion of pluralism, i.e., power is shared between numerous societal groups, elite theory underlines a dominance of a unified and concentrated source of power, which often does not accurately represent the collective needs of society. The theory also acknowledges the creation of counter-elites within social groups that are deliberately excluded from traditional power structures based on factors like race, gender, nobility, or religion. A significant issue is the ability of the powerful elites to incorporate these counter-elites. In democratic systems, there's a general expectation that voting will influence policy and that favored outcomes represent the majority of voters. However, a 2014 study indicated that this correlation heavily relies on voters' income levels. The study revealed a substantial link between voter income and the likelihood their policy preferences would be actualized. The higher the income, the greater the likelihood. The elite theory was first defined as autocracy by Polybius in 150 BCE, who confidently predicted that all three primary forms of political power, one man, monarchy, executive, few men, autocracy, many, democracy, would degrade into a corrupt version of itself without the balance of a mixed government. He identified that a monarchy could become tyranny, democracy could descend into mob rule, and an elite rule, autocracy, could degenerate into an oligarchy. Polybius essentially argued that such degradation can be avoided by implementing checks and balances between these forms of power and the subsequent political institutions. The story molds around the concept of power and authority embedded within key economic and political organizations. It portrays the elites as a set apart from the rest, not just by their positions, but also by their individual asset. These include intelligence and a particular skill set, and a profound involvement and investment in governance. The non-elites are envisioned as less capable in terms of managing their own governance. Hence, it's the elites who strive to make the governance function notably. A failing state would mean the elites lose the most. Vilfredo Pareto, an influential sociologist, stressed the superior psychological and intellectual prowess of elites, dubbing them as top achievers across all fields. He divided the elites into governing and non-governing, and also posited that a reigning elite could be succeeded by a newcomer. Gaetano Mosca, on the other hand, underscored the sociological and individual traits of the elites. He typified the elites as an organized minority in contrast to the disorganized masses. According to Mosca, the world is cleaved into ruling and non-political sections insisting on the elites' intellectual, moral, and material superiority. Mosca deemed them immensely respected and influential. Robert Michaels, another distinguished sociologist, formulated the iron law of oligarchy, stating that society and politics are controlled by a handful. Division of labor and social coordination are crucial, and all organizations are led by the elites in a bureaucratic fashion. Elmer Eric Schatzschneider provided a critique of the American pluralistic political theory. He disputed the perception of fair representation of citizens' interests by competing groups. He highlighted the overwhelming participation of educated and high-income individuals against those left out in the cold, which was far greater than the gap between voters and non-voters. In his work, The Semi-Sovereign People, Schatzschneider narrowed the scope of the pressure system, emphasizing on its upper-class bias. He dismissed the notion of automatic representation and favored fraction of a minority over the entire community. C. Wright Mills, in his book The Power Elite, put forth a fresh sociological perspective on power distribution within the United States. He pinpointed a power triumvirate, political, economic, and military, although disjointed, yet governing the United States collectively. The inspiration for the study primarily stemmed from the book Behemoth, The Structure and Practice of National Socialism, 1933-1944, by Franz Leopold Neumann. It provided the analytical toolkit needed to understand a political system's structure, acting as a warning about the potential dangers lurking within a modern capitalist democracy. The elite theory analysis of power was extrapolated to smaller societal units in community power studies, such as the one conducted by Floyd Hunter in 1953. Hunter delved into the intricate webs of power dynamics in his regional city, focusing on the actual wielders of power rather than those in overt leadership positions. His approach deployed a structural, functional lens to map hierarchies and networks of influence among different community actors like politicians, business people, and clergy. The aim of the study was to challenge prevailing notions of democracy in urban politics and reinforce the need for true representative democracy. The analytical approach mirrored in larger subsequent studies, such as M. Schwartz's investigation of the corporate elite's power structures in America. G.E. William Domhoff's contentious 1967 book Who Rules America also used this approach to map decision-making networks at local and national levels. Illustrating America's power structure, he argued a small elite owning and managing large income, generating assets dominate America's political and economic landscape, an argument similar to Hunter's. In contrast, Burnham's early work, The Managerial Revolution, proposed that all functional power was increasingly being channeled to managers rather than politicians or businessmen. Putnam also noted the rise of specialized knowledge among administrators and professionals as a game changer, shifting influence from the democratic process to technical advisors, pointing out that scientists, mathematicians, economists, and engineers of new intellectual technology are the emerging power players. Dye's book, Top-Down Policymaking, claimed that US public policy emerges not from the public, but from elite consensus within Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit organizations, think tanks, special interest groups, lobbying firms. He further explored this concept across multiple publications. Ralph Dahrendorf suggests in his book, Reflections on the Revolution in Europe, that political parties tend to act as providers of political services due to the high level of competence required for political action. These services include the administration of local and government public offices during elections. Each party attempts to persuade voters that it is best equipped to manage the state's business. Ideally, Dahrendorf proposes these parties would be openly recognized as service-providing companies, where the elected ruling class comprises of legally recognized company members and their associates. The ruling companies would be voted into power based on their ability to meet the interests and requirements of the majority. An analysis of 1779 policy matters conducted by Professors Martin Gilens and Benjamin Page revealed the disproportionate influence of the wealthy and business interest groups on U.S. government policy. Their findings suggested that the input of average citizens and traditional interest groups had negligible effect on policy decisions. Critics using the same data found that the wealthy emerged as victors more frequently when their interests clashed with those of the middle class. Although it sparked disagreement, many believe the collected data illustrates effective blockage of policies that favor the less fortunate by the rich and middle class. Lastly, Thomas Ferguson's investment theory of party competition posits that the cost of political awareness is too high for ordinary citizens, resulting in political systems largely run by elites and corporations. These elites often sway politics in their favor by financially contributing to and endorsing preferred parties and policies. This theory, which is largely seen as an elite one, is most extensively presented in Ferguson's 1995 book, Golden Rule: The Investment Theory of Party Competition and the Logic of Money-Driven Political Systems.